Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about ethical disasters in engineering. Our topics are the Ford Pinto and the Volkswagen scandal. Criteria for the Pinto was that there was poor engineering done on the Ford Pinto. This was so bad because it resulted in injury and sometimes even death when the Pinto was in a crash. And this was allowed because the corporate side of the company pushed the engineering people to skip steps that did not make sure the Pinto was safe.
During the Volkswagen scandal, Volkswagen created and installed defeat devices, which violated the Clean Air Act, and they did this because they could not meet U.S. emission standards.
Pinto overview. So the Pinto was rushed in production, and this was so it could keep up with the foreign competition bringing in fuel-efficient cars in the early 70s. This product was not properly crash tested, and it had poor engineering done because the gas tank was located in the rear, and when it was rear-ended, it was easily punctured, and sometimes it would create devastating failures that would result in injury and death because the car would either explode or be engulfed in flames. Lee Iacocca was one of the people that really pushed this car to be sent into production and pressured Bob Alexander, who was the vice president of engineering at the time. This is a picture of the Ford Pinto that pokes fun at it because it says, "Keep off my rear, I'm explosive." Because the Ford Pintos, mostly the two doors, when they were rear ended, the gas tank would be punctured and it would explode.
Some of the ethical and criminal issues for the Pinto, the lack of concern of the gas tank placement. Because it was placed in the back, it could be easily rear-ended and caused a huge fiery explosion, which was obviously a huge ethical violation for the people driving the Pinto. For the criminal, pre-production crash tests and carelessness, it was clear through some tests that this car could be proved lethal if once again rear-ended, and nonetheless to compete with Volkswagen, they still push this car into market. Looking at the societal, economical, and political impacts, for societal, it smeared Ford's name and almost devastated the reputation with the public. They just could no longer be trusted after this car was pushed into market. For the economical, harsh civil suits, recalls, and other big-name companies land small car markets. So ultimately, even though they pushed this car just to try to compete, they lost nonetheless, which really goes to show like skipping steps don't really like benefit at all. For the political, foreign markets outperform and outdo Ford, Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda land in domestic territory. Looking at the reasons for unethical conduct, the competition between Volkswagen and the small car market, the NSPE code violations, hold paramount the safety, health, welfare of the public, avoid deceptive acts.
Volkswagen violated the Clean Air Act and its regulations. The purpose of such act was to reduce the emissions of nitrogen oxide pollutants from vehicles in order to decrease the environmental contamination. Richard Doringham worked as a Volkswagen engine development after treatment and led a team of engineers that developed the diesel engine. Heinz Jacob Nausser worked as a Volkswagen head of engine development. Bernd Gottweis was a supervisor with responsibility for quality management and product safety. These engineers designed and installed a software function called the defeat device, which was used to cheat and pass the US emissions test and be able to commercialize the diesel engine vehicles in the US. The defeat device was designed to detect if the vehicle was being tested or not. When being tested, it would lower its nitrogen oxide emissions in order to pass this test. When not being tested, the vehicle would emit nitrogen oxide pollutants 30 times higher than the legal US standards. Later on, Volkswagen came with a newer version of such device because some cars were having hardware problems. The new device name was the steering wheel angle recognition, which allowed vehicles to detect and switch back and forth between the street and testing conditions. Heinz Jacob Nausser authorized the installation of such software on vehicles that were sold in the US. The cause of these ethics violations were to expand and overtake the automotive market in the US and to further enrich themselves.
These acts climaxed in 2016 when the United States filed a complaint against Volkswagen, alleging that they installed 590,000 of these defeat devices into their vehicles. And part of the reason this is so bad is, like Miguel is explaining, is that it causes the cars to emit a significant amount of nitrogen oxide gases, and this pollutes and causes harmful smog and soot. And this is very harmful for the elderly and children. Some impacts that occurred after this happened is that Volkswagen was required to fund a $2.7 billion mitigation trust fund, which later they contributed an additional $225 million to. Volkswagen was also required to pay $2 billion into their ZEV charging infrastructure and in promotion of ZEVs, which are their electric vehicles. Volkswagen was then required to pay $1.45 billion into a civil penalty for their alleged civil violations of the Clean Air Act. Some economical impacts that happened was as much as 23% of their stock plunged, which is approximately $17.6 billion in market value. And societally, they completely tarnished the Volkswagen brand name for years to come. The reason that they committed this act is because they realized they could not design a diesel engine that would meet the stricter US emission standards. And some codes that they completely violated was they practiced unlawful practice. They were not objective and truthful in their reports. You're not supposed to sign plans that are not applicable engineering standards, and you're supposed to practice sustainable development to protect the environment.
So in conclusion, the Pinto was a corporate decision that made Ford look bad, and this showed them that they are not to skip steps, and that if they do, it can cause people great harm. So this should be a lesson to all that will teach people that people's safety should be prioritized, and that you should not rush a car into production.
For the Volkswagen conclusion, they purposely deceived the United States and the world, and they took the easy way out instead of engineering a solution and designing a better vehicle. And this shows that doing the wrong thing will always catch up to you.